My name is Dale Harmon. I'm 59 years old, and I live alone on a small farm about 12 miles outside of Clover Creek, Tennessee. I don't own much. A woodworking shed I built with my own hands, an old blue truck with a crack in the windshield I keep meaning to fix, and about 40 acres of land that my wife Margaret and I bought together the year we turned 30. She's been gone 6 years now. Cancer, the fast kind, the kind that doesn't give you time to say half the things you meant to say. I'm not a man who talks easily. I work with my hands. I fix things. I'm more comfortable with a planer than I am with words, and most mornings I wake up early, make 1 cup of coffee, and sit on the porch listening to the birds before the silence gets too heavy. After Margaret died, I converted our old barn into an event venue. It wasn't something I'd planned. A neighbor suggested it, said the barn was beautiful, and it was a shame no one was using it. I figured it would give me something to do on weekends, something to keep the farm from feeling so empty. I rent it out for weddings mostly, anniversaries sometimes, a retirement party once. It feels strange, being the man who keeps the lights on for other people's happy endings. About a year ago, that changed. Everything changed. And it started on a Saturday in October, when a woman in a wedding dress walked into the middle of her own ruined ceremony and looked out at 80 guests who didn't know where to put their eyes. I didn't plan what I did next. I'm not sure any man plans something like that. All I know is I stood up. I need to back up a little, because none of what happened makes sense unless you understand who Claire Sutton is. She had booked the barn 9 months earlier. I remembered her from the first walkthrough. She ran her hand along the old oak beams and said, "Someone built this with real care." I told her my father and I had raised it together when I was 14. She said she hoped her marriage would be the same way, built with care, built to last. She was 40 years old, an elementary school teacher, patient in the way that only people who spend their days with 6-year-olds can be. She had warm brown eyes and a way of listening that made you feel like whatever you were saying mattered. Her fiancé, Marcus, came to 2 of the planning meetings and spent most of both of them on his phone. On the morning of the wedding, I'd been up since 5, flowers arranged, chairs set, the string lights on. I was checking the sound system when my assistant Patty said the groom's party had arrived, but Marcus hadn't come in from the parking lot. Nerves, I figured. Then a woman I didn't recognize pushed through the side door. She was shaking. "He's my boyfriend," she said. 2 years. I didn't know he was doing this." She held out her phone. Text messages, hundreds of them. Hotel receipts, things no one should have to see. And through the wall, I could hear the processional music starting. I thought about Claire, about what she'd said. Built with care, built to last. I walked into the barn. 80 people turned. Claire was at the altar, bouquet in both hands, face bright with a smile that was about to break. Marcus saw me coming up the aisle, and something shifted in his face. I stopped at the end of the aisle. "I'm sorry," I said. "There's something that needs to be addressed before this goes any further." Marcus stepped toward me. "This isn't your business." "It is," I said quietly. "This is my property, and the well-being of everyone on it is my responsibility. There's a woman outside who says she's been in a relationship with this man for the past 2 years. She has evidence. I think before another word is spoken here, you deserve to know that, Claire." The silence lasted about 4 seconds. Then the barn erupted. Marcus was shouting. Guests were on their feet. Claire stood completely still at the altar, chin up, not crying, the way people get still when they're deciding whether or not to fall apart. She didn't fall apart. She turned to the guests. "I'm sorry you came all this way. Please enjoy the food." She turned to Marcus. "Get out." Then she walked out the side door and sat down on my barn steps in her wedding dress. I brought her a glass of water. I sat a few steps below her and didn't say anything. Sometimes there's nothing to say. Finally, she said, "How long have you known?" "About 4 minutes before I came in." "Why did you do it?" "You didn't have to." "Because you were about to walk into something you couldn't walk back out of, and you deserved better than that." She was quiet for a long time. Then, "How old are you?" 59. She almost laughed. Not a mean laugh. The laugh of someone who has been holding themselves together very tightly and found one thing that surprised them enough to crack it open. "I'm 40, she said. "I know." That's a big difference. It is. Does it matter right now? She shook her head. No, right now it really doesn't. I thought I was just a man doing a decent thing on a hard day, and that she would go home and grieve and rebuild, and that would be that. I was wrong. Claire didn't leave that night until almost 10 o'clock. Most of the guests had cleared out by 7. One of her friends, a small woman named Donna, hugged me in the parking lot and said, "Thank you for what you did. She's going to be okay." "I know she is," I said. Claire was still in the barn, sitting at one of the reception tables in her wedding dress, eating a piece of the cake the caterer had left. "This is a very good cake," she said. "It is," I agreed. "Feels like a waste to throw it out." "Sit," I said. "I'll get you another slice." We ate wedding cake together at 10 o'clock on what was supposed to be her wedding night. I made coffee. She told me about her third graders, how one boy had brought in a frog he'd caught in the creek and let it loose during math class. She laughed, telling it, a real laugh. Before she left, she stood in the doorway, looking back at the barn. "My grandmother used to say a place holds on to the feeling of the people who built it." She studied the beams. "This place feels patient. My father was the most patient man I ever knew." She nodded. "I'll come back and pay you for the full rental." "Don't," I said. "It wasn't the wedding you booked. I'm not charging you for a wedding that didn't happen." She looked at me. "Okay, thank you." She drove away down the gravel road and I watched the taillights until they were gone. 3 days later, she called and asked if she could stop by. I said, of course. She sat in the woodworking shed while I sanded a cabinet, not needing anything particular, just somewhere quiet. After Margaret died, I spent a lot of time in that shed for the same reason. We didn't talk much. I made coffee. She left after an hour and said, "Same time next week?" I said yes before I'd thought about it. She came back the following Tuesday, and the one after that. By the third visit, she was handing me pieces without being asked, knowing which tool I'd reach for next, learning the rhythm of the work. She had good hands, careful and steady. "Did you always want to do this?" she asked once. "Work with wood?" "My father did it," I said. "I followed him in here when I was about 5 years old, and I never really left." She smiled. "What did Margaret think of it?" She'd heard me mention Margaret. I hadn't talked about her much, and Claire never pushed. But she asked careful questions, the way her students probably did questions that said, "I'm paying attention to you." "She used to bring me sandwiches in here," I said. "Said if she didn't, I'd work straight through to dark without eating." I paused. She was probably right. Claire was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "She sounds wonderful." She was. "You must miss her." "Every day," I said. "It gets different. It doesn't get gone." Claire nodded. "Different. That's a good word for it." "Did you love him?" I asked. I almost didn't. It wasn't my business. But it was just the two of us and the smell of wood shavings, and I said it anyway. She thought about that for a while. "I loved the idea of him," she said. "I loved the version of him he showed me the first 2 years. By the end, I think I loved the story more than the actual man." She paused. "I'm 40 years old, Dale. Most of my friends have kids in middle school. I thought if I didn't take the life I was supposed to have right then, I never would." She looked at her hands. "That's a bad reason to marry someone." "It is," I agreed. "You're not going to tell me I'm not too old to find the right thing?" "No," I said. "You don't need me to tell you that." She looked up at me. Something in her face shifted. "No," she said, "I don't." The weeks that followed were quieter, but fuller. The farm had been quiet for 6 years, and now it was quiet with someone in it, which is a completely different thing. She started arriving on Saturday mornings. She always brought something: apples from the farmer's market, soup she'd made, once a small pot of rosemary she'd grown from seed. "I have more than I know what to do with," she said, setting it on the workbench. "I'll put it by the kitchen door," I said. "Margaret always kept herbs there." "Does it bother you, me bringing things?" "No, it doesn't." I cooked dinner for her the third Saturday, nothing elaborate. Chicken from the farm next door, roasted with what was left in the garden. I set 2 places at the table Margaret and I had bought at an estate sale 20 years ago, and we ate with the windows open and the evening coming in. "I like being here," she said. "I'm glad. It doesn't feel strange to you, having someone here? Like putting weight on a leg that has healed strange at first, then ordinary?" "It did at first," I said. "Less now." She looked at me across the table. The evening light was the color of old honey. "What are we doing, Dale?" "I think we're two people who needed somewhere to put down for a while," I said, "and we both ended up here." "That's very practical." "I'm a practical man." She held my gaze. "You're also a kind one, the kindest man I've met in a long time. Don't let that reputation get out. I've got a very stern image to maintain." She laughed, the easy kind that doesn't feel like work, and I found myself laughing too. It was early December when she first told me about the money. We'd been walking the property line after dinner, a thing we'd started doing on Saturday evenings, watching the fields go dark and the stars come out. She was quiet in a different way that night, pulling at the cuff of her jacket. "Can I ask you something that might be uncomfortable?" she said. "Go ahead." "Marcus and I opened a joint account when we got engaged, for the house we were going to buy together." She stopped walking. "I put in $64,000, my savings. Years of it." She said it carefully, like she'd been measuring the words. "The account was joint, but the property we put a deposit on, he'd had the purchase contract written only in his name. He told me it was a tax thing, that his accountant had recommended it." Something cold settled in my chest. "He never put his name on the joint account?" I said. "No, I handled most of the paperwork. He said he trusted me." She gave a short, hollow breath. "Clever, wasn't it?" "Where is the money now?" "In that account, which I have access to, technically, but he's claiming the property deposit came out of it, which means the remaining balance is tied to a disputed asset. His lawyer sent a letter last week saying that if I withdraw the funds, he'll file a civil complaint saying I'm taking money that's earmarked for a shared investment. But the investment was only in his name." "Yes." "And the money was yours?" "Yes." I didn't say anything for a moment. I looked out at the dark fields. "Do you have documentation?" I said. "Bank transfers showing the money came from your account originally?" "Yes, I have all of it." "Did you keep any of the emails? Any of the messages where he explained the account structure?" She was quiet. "I might," she said. "Find them," I said. "All of them. Don't delete anything." She looked at me. "Dale, he's counting on you not fighting," I said. "He's counting on you being embarrassed and wanting this finished. That's the play." Her eyes had gone bright in the darkness. Not sad bright, something steadier. "You think I should fight?" "I think $64,000 and your dignity are both worth fighting for." She stood very still for a moment. Then she reached out and took my hand. She held it for just a moment, the way you'd hold something you were afraid to break, and then she let go. "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank me yet," I said. "We've got work to do." She came back the next day, and we sat at the kitchen table for 3 hours. Her laptop, my yellow legal pad. We went through everything: bank statements, account documents, emails where Marcus had confirmed she was contributing her savings, texts where he'd called it, "You're 64 and what you're putting in." He'd been careless because he was certain she would give up. I wrote everything down in order, the way my father had taught me to document work, every measurement twice, every detail recorded. "My brother-in-law is a retired attorney," I said. "He knows people. I'd like to make a call tomorrow if that's all right." "You'd do that?" "Claire, yes." She looked at the table, then at me. "You know what my mother would say if she saw this?" "What?" "Where has this man been all your life?" I didn't know what to do with that, so I picked up my pencil and went back to the legal pad, but I was smiling. I didn't let her see it. January came in cold. She graded papers at my kitchen table while I worked in the shed on Saturday afternoons. We had a system by then. She'd tap on the shed window at 4 o'clock, which meant "Come in, the coffee's on." I'd tap on the kitchen window at 6, which meant "Come out, dinner's almost ready." One afternoon I came in to find her sitting at the table with one of her students' drawings spread open in front of her. A child's drawing of a family crayon figures, a house, a yellow sun. She was just looking at it. "Whose is that?" I asked. "Thomas, my quietest one," She touched the edge of the paper. He never talks in class, but he draws constantly. She smiled. He drew this for me. Said it was a family being happy. I poured the coffee, set hers in front of her. Do you want children? I asked. Again, I almost didn't say it. But we'd gotten to a place where not saying things felt more wrong than saying them. She wrapped both hands around the mug. I used to think I'd missed it, she said, after the wedding. I thought, well, that's it then. I'm 40 and it's over. She paused. I don't think that now. No? No, she looked up. I think the timing of things is sometimes different than we plan. I think some things that look like they're ending are actually just beginning. I looked at her. She looked at me. The kitchen was warm, and the shed was cold outside, and there was coffee, and a child's drawing of a happy family on my table, and I thought, this is the moment. If there's a moment, it's this one. Claire, I said. I know, she said. That was all either of us said for a while. Marcus Reeves was not a stupid man. That was what made him dangerous. He was 44, worked in commercial real estate, and had the particular confidence of a man who had gotten away with things his whole life. By the time my brother-in-law's contact, an attorney named Sandra Voss, had reviewed Claire's documentation and sent Marcus's lawyer an initial letter, Marcus had already moved to reframe everything. His position, Claire had been an equal partner. The deposit came from joint funds. The contract being in his name alone was a mutual legal decision. He was willing to settle by returning 40% of Claire's contribution, roughly $25,000, in exchange for her releasing all claims. He was offering her 40 cents on the dollar of her own money and calling it generous. Sandra read the counter letter to us over the phone. When she finished, the line was quiet. He's guessing you'll take it, Sandra said. A lot of people do. They're exhausted, embarrassed. They just want it over. I'm not taking it, Claire said. Her voice was very calm. Good, Sandra said, because I think we can do better. The few more things Sandra needed included a full accounting of every transaction in the joint account, the original property purchase contract, and any records Claire had of communications with Marcus's agent regarding the contract language. Claire had most of it. What she didn't have, she helped me understand well enough that I could see where the holes were. The hole that mattered most was this. The property listing contract said buyer, singular, and Marcus's name. But there were two emails, one from Marcus's real estate agent, one from Marcus himself, where the property had been referred to as the couple's purchase, your place. One email said, once you two close on this, you'll have something solid. Your two, Sandra said when Claire read them to her. That's his agent, calling it a joint acquisition in writing. That's something. Is it enough? I asked. It's a start, Sandra said. But I want one more thing. I want to know if there's any evidence that Marcus was in this relationship with the other woman before the engagement. I looked at Claire. Claire looked at me. Let me make a call, Claire said. The other woman's name was Jessica. She had appeared at the barn that day in genuine distress, and she had not been heard from since. Claire found her through mutual social contacts, and they spoke on the phone for nearly an hour. I wasn't on the call. Claire sat in my kitchen with the door half closed, and when she came out, her face was composed, but her hands weren't quite still. She has messages, Claire said, going back 4 years. 4 years. The engagement had been 18 months. She's willing to provide them? She's angry, Claire said. She was lied to, too. A pause. She's a decent person. She got played just like I did. Will she give Sandra what she needs? Yes. What Jessica had, as it turned out, was not just messages. She had financial records. Marcus had been using her to funnel money through a secondary account, small transfers, kept under reporting thresholds, skimming from several different sources. Sources that included, when Sandra put the picture together, what appeared to be funds from the joint account that had never gone toward the property deposit at all. Sandra called us on a Thursday evening. I had the phone on speaker on the kitchen table. Claire sat across from me. He's been moving money, Sandra said. The deposit on the property was significantly less than what came out of the joint account. The difference, about $11,000, went somewhere else. I can trace most of it. A pause. This isn't just a civil dispute anymore. This is fraud. The words sat on the table between us. What does that mean? Claire asked. It means Marcus Reeves has a problem, Sandra said. And it means we go into mediation next week with a lot more ammunition than he thinks we have. After she hung up, Claire sat quietly for a moment. Then she put her head in her hands, not sobbing, just tired, the bone-deep tired of someone who has been carrying something heavy for a long time. I reached across the table and put my hand on her arm. Hey, I said. She looked up. It's almost over, I said. She nodded. She reached up and put her hand over mine. We sat like that for a while, neither of us speaking, the kitchen quiet around us. The week before mediation, Marcus escalated. He had a message delivered through his attorney. If Claire proceeded with the mediation and any related claims, he would countersue for defamation, citing Claire's public humiliation of him at the wedding venue as reputational damage. He was seeking $75,000. Claire called me when she got the letter. Her voice was tight. He can't, I said. He walked into my venue and participated in a wedding ceremony under false pretenses. I'm the one who spoke at that ceremony. If there's a defamation question, it involves me, not you. He knows that, she said. He's trying to rattle me. Are you rattled? A silence. A little, she admitted. Good, I said. Means you understand what's at stake. Means you're taking it seriously. I paused. Are you going to back down? A longer silence. No, she said. Then we go to mediation, I said, and we bring everything we have. I called Sandra that evening and told her about the counter threat. She was silent for a moment, and then she said something that I thought about for a long time afterward. Men like Marcus, she said, never believe a quiet man has done the work. They always assume the quiet man has nothing. Tell me what I need to bring Tuesday, I said. The mediation was held in a conference room in downtown Clover Creek. Beige walls, a long table, a neutral mediator named Mr. Peralta, who had the calm, unremarkable manner of a man who had seen everything twice. Marcus arrived with his attorney, a sharp-looking man named Garrett, who wore the kind of suit that says, I've done this before. Marcus himself was dressed in the careful way of a man who has prepared his appearance, the same way he prepares his arguments, everything arranged to tell a story that may or may not be true. He looked at Claire when he came in. She looked back at him steadily and said nothing. He looked at me, and his expression shifted a flicker of contempt he didn't quite hide. The old farmer, the man with the barn. He hadn't expected me to be there. I was there because Sandra had asked me to come. What I'd witnessed at the wedding and what I'd documented in my own hand in the weeks following was part of the record. I brought the yellow legal pad. Garrett opened by restating Marcus's position, equal partnership, joint funds, a technical arrangement in the contract that had no bearing on the spirit of the agreement. He was measured and confident, and I could see him watching Claire, looking for the place where she would flinch. Sandra let him finish. She thanked Mr. Peralta, and then she opened the folder she'd brought, and she laid things on the table one at a time, not dramatically, quietly. The way you put tools out before you start a job. The bank records first, showing the origin of every dollar in the joint account. Then the property purchase contract, Marcus's name alone. Then the emails from Marcus's agent using the word your in the plural. Then Marcus's own email referring to, once you two close on this. Garrett interjected twice. Sandra acknowledged him and continued. Then the records Sandra had traced of the additional transfers, the $11,000 that had never gone toward the property. Garrett stopped interjecting. We also have, Sandra said, communication records from a third party who was in a concurrent relationship with Mr. Reeves beginning approximately 4 years ago, predating the engagement by some 30 months. She placed Jessica's statement on the table. These communications include references to Mr. Problem, Reeves's management of separate finances and to payments made to this third party from accounts associated with the subject joint account. Marcus said something to Garrett in a low voice. Garrett put a hand on his arm. Mr. Peralta was reading. He had been reading for several minutes without looking up. Mr. Reeves, Sandra said, and her voice was perfectly level. Your counterposition includes a defamation claim arising from statements made at the Harmon Barn event venue on October 14th. I'd like to introduce the written account of the event venue owner, who was present for the disclosure. She looked at me. I opened the legal pad. I read what I had written, the same way I'd read it to Sandra twice before, the same way my father had taught me to read measurements carefully, without rushing, because the numbers matter. I described what the woman had told me, what she had shown me, what I had said at the altar, and why. I read the exact words I had used. I described Claire's response and the sequence of events. I closed the pad. Garrett was very quiet. Marcus was looking at the table. The defamation counterclaim, Sandra said, relies on the premise that the disclosure was false or made in malice. Mr. Harmon's account establishes that the disclosure was accurate, corroborated, and made with the intent of preventing a fraudulent marriage ceremony from proceeding. She paused. Additionally, we are prepared to formally notify relevant authorities regarding the financial transfers, should this matter not be resolved today. The word authorities was not a threat. Sandra said it the same way she said everything else, plainly, but it sat in the room differently. Mr. Peralta looked up from his reading. He looked at Marcus. Marcus looked at Garrett. Garrett looked at his hands. And then a remarkable thing happened. The kind of thing Sandra had described to me in advance, but that I hadn't quite believed until I saw it. Marcus's composure cracked not all at once, but in pieces, like a wood joint that has been stressed for too long and finally gives. He started talking. He talked about the account. He explained the transfers. He used words like temporary and intended to replace, and I was managing the funds as I saw appropriate, given the circumstances of the investment. He kept talking, filling the silence, explaining, justifying, and every word he said was another data point in Sandra's folder. Garrett put a hand on his arm again. Marcus stopped. "I'd like a 10-minute recess," Garrett said. Mr. Peralta granted it. Sandra looked at me across the table. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. When the mediation reconvened, Garrett made a revised offer on Marcus's behalf. Full return of Claire's $64,000, transfer of her name as co-owner on the property, pending a structured buyout or joint sale within 18 months. Withdrawal of the defamation counterclaim. In exchange, Claire and Sandra would not pursue formal financial fraud reporting. Sandra looked at Claire. Claire looked at me. I gave the smallest nod. The decision was hers. It had always been hers. I was just there to make sure she had what she needed to make it. She turned back to Sandra. "I want the money within 30 days, Claire said. "Not a payment plan, the full amount." Garrett conferred quietly with Marcus. "Agreed," he said. "And the property title is amended within 60 days, Sandra said, with a penalty clause if the timeline is missed." Another quiet conference. "Agreed." Claire signed the agreement with a steady hand. Marcus signed without looking at her. When we walked out of the building into the cold January air, Claire stopped on the sidewalk and stood very still. She looked up at the sky. She breathed. I waited. After a moment, she looked at me. "That's what $64,000 feels like," she said. "How does it feel?" "Heavy," she said, and then lighter. She exhaled, like something being put down. "You did that," I said. "We did that," she said. She reached over and straightened the collar of my jacket with both hands, the way Margaret used to do when she thought I'd dressed carelessly. It was such a natural thing, such an ordinary gesture, and Claire didn't seem to notice she'd done it until her hands were already there, and then she looked up at me and neither of us moved for a moment. "Thank you," she said, "for standing up." She meant the barn. She also meant today. She also meant all of it. "Come on," I said. "I'll buy you lunch." She smiled. "The most romantic thing you've ever said to me." "I've got range," I said. She laughed, and we walked down the sidewalk together in the January cold, and I thought that the world was sometimes a very fine place. We were married on a Saturday in October. 1 year, almost to the day, from the morning she had sat on my barn steps in her wedding dress eating cake and not falling apart. It was a small ceremony. 30 people. Sandra came. Donna came. My brother-in-law, who had started all this with a phone call, sat in the front row and wept, which he will deny. Jessica came, at Claire's specific invitation, because Claire said she deserved to see that good things were still possible. I thought that was one of the most generous things I'd ever heard. The barn looked the way I'd always hoped it would look when the moment in it was the right one. String lights, oak beams, flower arrangements Claire had designed herself with help from a student's mother who kept a garden. The evening light came through the old windows and turned everything the color of honey. I wore the same suit I'd worn to Margaret's funeral because it was the only suit I owned, and because I thought Margaret would have understood that. I thought she would have understood a lot of things about this day. Claire walked in from the side door, the same door I'd come through a year before when I'd stopped a wedding. She wore a simple cream dress. She carried a single stem of rosemary from the pot she'd brought to my workbench the previous spring. She looked at me the whole way down the aisle. When she reached me, she said, very quietly, just for me, "I'd say you look handsome, but you'll get smug about it." I said, "Too late. I'm already smug." The minister laughed. Half the guests laughed. Claire looked at me with her eyes bright and full. We said our vows, simple ones we'd written ourselves. She said she had spent a long time looking for something real and found it in the last place she'd expected, on a farm outside Clover Creek with a man who worked with his hands and didn't say much and showed up when it mattered. I said that I had thought I was done with beginnings. I said I had thought the best things were behind me. I said I was glad to have been wrong. The minister said, "You may kiss your bride." There was applause. There was the sound of my brother-in-law weeping. There were the string lights overhead and the October evening outside, and 60 years of my life converging on a moment I had not planned and could not have predicted and would not trade for anything in the world. In March, Claire told me we were expecting. We were in the kitchen. She'd been quiet all morning. She handed me a small piece of paper and watched my face. I sat down. I looked at it for a long time. "Dale," she said. "I'm thinking," I said. "About what?" "About how to thank God adequately. I'm working on it." She sat down across from me and reached over. I took her hand. "We're going to need a bigger farm," she said. "Already figuring that out," I said. She laughed. I laughed. Outside the kitchen window, the March fields were going green, and the sky was the particular blue that only happens in early spring. Somewhere in the shed, a cabinet sat half-finished. Rosemary grew by the kitchen door. The yellow legal pad was in the drawer, my handwriting all through it, the record of everything that had led to this exact morning. I thought about the barn, about a woman in a wedding dress on the steps, about what it means to stand up. I don't know that I did anything extraordinary on that October morning. I didn't think about it. I saw a person about to walk into something she couldn't walk back from, and I did the only thing I knew how to do. I stood up. My father used to say that a good man is not the man who does the grand things. He's the man who does the right thing when it's small and inconvenient and costs him something. He shows up. He keeps his word. He builds things that last. I built this barn with my own hands 40 years ago, with my father beside me. I have watched other people's lives begin inside it for years. I listened to vows and laughter and music and the sound of happiness that I had learned to appreciate from a distance, the way you appreciate warmth when you are standing a little outside of it. I didn't expect the happiness to walk in and sit down at my table. But here is what I have learned, late and slowly. Life does not keep to the timeline you planned. Sometimes the things that look like endings are not endings. Sometimes a door closes, and you sit in the dark for years and learn patience and silence and how to hold a grief without being swallowed. And sometimes, on an ordinary Saturday in October, there is a knock on the barn door, and it isn't sorrow. It's something you didn't know you were still waiting for. Love doesn't wait for life to be neat. It knocks on your door tired and late and carrying more than you expected. You open the door anyway. You stand up. That's all it takes.